Welcome back to Fountain Avenue Dishes. Emily and I are here today with a very special guest. He is a professor at Franklin and Marshall College, and we have a really fun conversation ahead of us.
Yeah, so I'm going to let Josh introduce himself, but I also thought I should tell you a little bit about how we got to know Josh. So we walk our kids to school. There are a number of families that do so, and so Josh and I every day would walk the kids to school. Maybe we'd nod, maybe we'd wave, but that was kind of the gist of it because no one really wants to get into it at 7:45 in the morning. But one day, I don't remember exactly how, but we started talking about, how's, your daughter doing? How's your kids doing? Great. We started talking about the parking situation on the side of the road. And then we started to say, oh, hey, who are you? And what do you do other than walk your children to school? And when I heard that Josh was a professor at F&M, psychology professor, specifically in ethics and morality, I thought that was so cool, especially because Anne and I talk so much too about how morality and ethics are included in our discussions around food. Are certain foods good and bad? And we'll get into this as we talk, but really I was just like, wow, we're aligned. We have some more things to talk about professionally than just our kids in school. So, Josh, I want to let you give your own little elevator pitch as to who you are and your background, because we'll probably botch it. But I just wanted to let you know we're glad to have you here as a neighbor, as a friend, and an expert in your field.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really, really great. I'm an associate professor of psychology at Franklin and Marshall College, and my research focus is on moral development and on moral beliefs generally, how people make ascriptions of, how people decide what kinds of entities deserve moral concern and what kinds of things are less deserving of moral concern. And I've done a lot of work also on ideas about purity and naturalness and disgust. And so even though my focus is on morality, I find myself consistently coming back to questions that revolve around food in various ways. And I think food is just such a rich topic, and there is so much psychologically interesting happening. So it's, also really great to get to talk to people who know about the food from the more kind of practical side of eating.
Oh, this is exciting.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of questions for you today, but we thought we would start with some fun, easy ones, because I feel like these things are just interesting to everyone, like coffee or tea.
Coffee. I like tea, but I have gotten dependent enough on caffeine that black tea is not enough.
Sweet or salty?
Both, ideally. But savory, salty, typically over sweet.
Okay.
And I feel like we're already we can't decide.
Okay, that is me.
Yeah, these are hard questions.
Okay, and I'm a person who can never choose a favorite, so I actually tried to tailor these so they were you didn't have to get stuck. I took out the what is your favorite food, because I'd be like, oh my gosh, there are so many. Okay, so Anyway, something that's always in your refrigerator.
That's a good question. We pretty much always have oat milk, and for the coffee and the tea, and then typically hummus is very much a go-to that I will put on anything.
So, what is your favorite meal? Breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
I think usually dinner, but depending on the breakfast, it could be breakfast.
Yeah, depending on how hungry you are when you wake up in the morning. Do you have a favorite restaurant here in Lancaster?
I love Callaloo. I'm really partial to them and love their spice, and I think they just have really, really interesting dishes. Norbu is another favorite.
Oh, good. Yeah, they're good ones.
Yeah.
Omnivore or vegetarian?
I'm actually vegan.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good. That wasn't in my question.
Yeah.
This ties into some things that we'll talk about later, which I'm excited about. And last one for now. Do you have a favorite guilty pleasure?
Such
That
a
is-
loaded question,
yeah.
Anne. If he can't answer salty or sweet, I don't know.
It's true. I mean, I do like chocolate a lot. So I think almost every day I have at least a little bit of chocolate.
Okay, so
at
then
the-
dark or milk?
Definitely
or,
dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you like 7? Are you like a really dark kind of a person? Like,
I think 70 is sort of
yeah.
the perfect
That's sort of a
percent.
sweet spot. I'm
Yeah.
a 70 person too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was very informative. Thank you.
I feel like we need to
Yeah.
now know your signs because you guys have been very aligned in the question
Sagittarius.
answer. Yeah.
Scorpio. I don't know if
Oh,
those
it's your
are-
birthday month.
Yeah, it was I just turned 40.
Happy
couple weeks ago.
birthday.
Thank you.
Ooh, happy birthday. Are you
Thanks.
Vivi's the 12th?
I'm the 5th.
Oh.
And I'm the 29th.
Okay.
So we're
Yeah.
close.
I'm feeling that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we ready?
We are.
Okay. So these questions are just going to get harder, Josh. You
Okay,
ready?
I'm ready.
Will you define morality and ethics for us?
I think that is extremely hard.
Yes.
And after all these years, I still don't think that there's a great definition of morality. I co-wrote a commentary a couple years ago on a paper that was trying to define morality, where we argued that it's not really worth attempting to even define it, that it just can mean so many different things to different people and is very culturally contingent and hard to really kind of demarcate clearly, and it might just not be a very meaningful category. And there are plenty of languages that don't have a word for morality.
Ooh.
that
Can you tell us any languages that don't have?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
That's
but,
interesting.
But yeah, they're definitely...
So given that you don't have a definition per se, how do you approach that with your students? And do you have any favorite topics to discuss with them? Are there any areas that you find they get really excited about?
I think a lot of the things that I'm interested in, morality, ideology, I mean, even food, I think so many things don't have a very narrow, clear definition. And so I tend to approach things by kind of investigating more specific, narrower kind of subcategories within these big umbrellas. And I think they may be kind of more or less relevant depending on a person's definition or perspective. But I think, all of these are at least in the same universe of being related in some sort of way. I tend to kind of go to the more specific lower level of like, these are some interesting things that we can talk about. And you might think that they all relate to morality or you might not. But regardless, let's just discuss how people think about these various topics is how I typically approach things.
So if we're going to talk about food, and I know you mentioned you were vegan, and to me that has connotations towards there, and some people maybe it's they'll choose veganism for health, or they just want to try it out. Certainly, some people choose it for moral reasons. Maybe including veganism, but also besides veganism, are there any other examples of either diets people follow or specific foods that are assigned morality that either you talk about in class or
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has food taboos. There don't seem to be any cultures worldwide that are permissive about eating anything. And I mean, there are cultures where it's a sign of respect to eat remains of dead people. There are plenty of cultures that will eat dogs or cats or monkeys. And all of these things are off limits for us. But then in those cultures, there are many other things that are off limits to them. I think the nature of eating does always involve certain kinds of boundaries. And I mean, the omnivore's dilemma classically is that
it's a dilemma. It's such a
It's
dilemma.
so hard to figure out like what to eat and what's okay, what's not.
Well, and I guess why as humans do we feel the need to assign those moral values and consider things good or bad? Clean is a word that we hear a lot today, and the opposite of that sort of implies dirty, and so it's good. It comes down to good or bad. Why? How do these sort of ways of thinking become established and ingrained in people?
It's a great question. And I think there are a lot of different compelling answers depending on sort of the level of analysis or the scope.
Give us some specifics.
So, yeah, I think if you look kind of historically, there are some anthropologists who have made a fairly convincing case that a lot of food taboos are around animals that could be okay to eat, but in the long run might end up being sort of detrimental. So if you look at prescriptions against pork, for example, both Jewish people and Muslims say that pork is off limits and that that's dirty, and it gets moralized, but the historical reason for that seems to be that pigs eat a lot of the same kinds of food that people eat. And so in arid environments and deserts where water and food are more scarce and hard to come by, you don't want to be raising pigs that will then eat some of the food that is more precious or more needed for human consumption. And so these taboos emerged in these cultures that both emerged out of the desert. And you can see with the spread of Islam that Islam has spread really easily into other areas that are also more arid. So like Northern Africa, for example, in the Sahara, Islam has spread fairly rapidly. But as soon as you get into the forests, into the lush, more resource plentiful areas of Africa, Islam has had a harder time flourishing. So it seems like there are various kinds of environmental reasons that can explain the existence of certain taboos. Evolutionarily, there are various claims that food is regulated in ways that protect health, that meat is tabooed much more often than non-meat, and potentially that's because meat is more typically a cause of disease. It can harbor more bacteria than vegetables, fruits, things like that. I don't think that evidence is as compelling as some of the scholars have thought. I tend to think that the reasons around taboos are typically a little bit more social, that food helps to regulate certain social group boundaries. And food is one thing that serves as a social glue, that like many important social gatherings happen around food, that people eat food socially in public very often. And a lot of cultures have certain kinds of fermented foods that are kind of centerpieces in many ways. And those sorts of foods are very much acquired tastes. And so, like for us, cheese is something that we typically find delicious, but a lot of people who are from cultures that don't eat cheese have a hard time stomaching it. For us, various kinds of like fermented tofu or other sorts of things seem disgusting to us. And it's hard to kind of engage in a dinner or a social gathering where you're trying to eat another culture's food that you find gross for whatever reason. And so that shows,
and the
I'm
story,
not part.
I think that's such a good example with fermented foods, because people historically needed to ferment them to preserve them.
Right.
So, that's just another good example of sort of why. But if you it's all these acquired tastes, and if you just don't eat them, or spice is the same way, right? If you're in a culture where they just eat a lot of spicy foods, children can eat them and it's no big deal. But then for us, in just how the differences can be so vast in terms of what our palates tolerate. I think that's really fascinating. But to your point, sort of looking into the whys behind that is really interesting.
Yeah, I think about it. When you rationalize people's decisions about their, taboo foods, it makes sense. And then you think how that's extrapolated maybe to like the past 10, 20 years, where food culture, diet culture, choosing foods has been overtaken in a way by social media, advertising. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen like certain foods or diets be capitalized upon by different businesses to make money or to move people in a certain way?
This is also a topic that I find fascinating. That's a little bit further outside my wheelhouse, but I do find it really interesting that a lot of these companies use kind of moralized language or ideas about naturalness or purity or something like that in the marketing techniques, and it does seem like people have a really strong bias to want what's natural. And even though like there are all sorts of things that could be labeled natural or not natural, depending on kind of how you see them. I think the labeling around food is really a very powerful force that doesn't always translate to the actual content of the food. But
would you are those are using those terms in your mind moral and ethical? To sort of persuade people that something's pure, or fresher, cleaner. Like, is that okay?
So is it a moral practice to be persuading with that? That's a really interesting question. And I tend to shy away a little bit from making those kinds of judgments as at least a psychologist. So like wearing my academic hat, my training is more on like trying to figure out why and explain how it is that people think about these things. But yeah, I mean, I think there certainly is a lot of manipulation that happens at the level of propaganda, advertising, things like that, where people are sort of nudging people and maybe taking away autonomy or convincing people of certain things and leading them to believe that certain kinds of things are true when it's not. It's concealing something.
Mm-hmm. So you're in your role, you're more asking the questions. So like you can say that perhaps this is manipulative, but you're not going to pass like a judgment necessarily on that, right?
At least as a researcher, as an academic.
No, I respect that. And it kind of leads
yeah.
into my next question of how do we as parents and even grandparents who are setting an example for our children and grandchildren manage our own moral compass to help those kids navigate issues like diet, body image, body size, judgment of others. How do you approach that? Because a lot of that is learned behavior, right? And then with social media kind of pushing a lot of, it can be very difficult for, I think, kids these days. So what can parents and grandparents do?
Right. So I think it's probably really hard to prevent that kind of exposure, that kids are going to see these kinds of advertisements and these kinds of values being propagated. I think probably the best thing to do is just to have honest conversations with kids about like why it is that advertisers are doing these things and what they're trying to achieve and why they use the kinds of techniques that they use. And I think kids can appreciate these sorts of things from a fairly early age.
Well, and I think if we understand the whys of why people are advertising this way and understand that things are business and all of those nuances, it makes it a little easier to perhaps see through certain things and understand maybe is this a good choice? Is this a good purchase? Is this not? If from a foundational level we know kind of the logic that goes into the marketing of products and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah, just to go back to what you had said, which I thought was really interesting when you're talking about advertisers capitalizing on words like natural and pure. But you've also said that natural and pure mean completely different things for different cultures, right? So it's like, how can those ingredients be natural and pure to every single person? Somehow they can't, but they're advertising it as if it is. And I think that's really interesting as you say, like, what is natural, what is pure? And you're like, I can't really answer that question because it is kind of an unanswerable question. And
depending on your vantage point.
And so if you're a kid, and again, whether it's like politics or whatever it is, as a parent or as a grandparent, to say, if your friend, right, at school is eating X, Y, or Z, or a family member is eating X, Y, and Z, and maybe you personally don't understand it or don't like it, or it doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong, and it doesn't mean that what you're doing is right, or what they're doing is not natural and what you're doing is natural, because those things mean different things to different people. Right. And so kind of on that same topic, what exactly is like lunchbox culture at school when kids are kind of at lunch and they're sitting down? Tell us a little bit about how you see lunchbox culture these days.
Yeah. So first, just on that like earlier point about purity and naturalness, I think those words can get attached to all sorts of different things. But I think it does tend to be the case that purity is associated with kind of holiness, goodness, morality, fairly universally from what we can tell. And so by attaching that concept or that label to something, it does sort of elevate the goodness and then therefore kind of detract from the goodness or increase the badness of things that are labeled as not pure, not natural. And I think naturalness is especially tricky. We got some Dr. Bronner's soap recently, and there was something on it saying like this is 100% made from things that were found on Earth, or like made from the Earth, or something like that. And it's like, I mean, so like everything is like natural in some way. Like it's
you're not
supernatural.
Come on, Dr. Bronner's, you're not gonna trick the professor of psychology, okay?
but that rhetoric is still like very appealing.
Yes,
I do like their soaps. They smell so good.
Yeah,
like
it's true. They do.
Peppermint.
If you're listening, Dr. Bronner, yes.
Peppermint.
But yeah, lunchbox culture, I think, is another example of how social eating tends to be. And I have a colleague at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro who's done some research on the ways in which kids from an early age start policing what other kids have in their lunchboxes. And if it's not sort of normative for American culture, kids can be ostracized, shamed for various kinds of foods, and a lot of kids from other cultures tend to feel shy or not great about eating their foods cultures around sort of the majority culture in the United States. And this is something that, already food is creating these social boundaries from a
Is that just an
age.
intrinsic desire to feel that the way we do, like I do something is better than the way somebody else does something? Like what, because that, I think we've all observed that, but do you see a why to that?
Is it like a gut? Is it like a gut check? Like, am I doing it right? Because I'm doing it right, and if you're not doing it how I'm doing it, then how do I know?
And doing it right? Do we intuitively want to be better? And if like our way should be right, can you boil it down to something as simple as that innate feeling?
I think there's a lot of that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kids are also extremely coalitional from an early age. That people generally gravitate very quickly toward in groups and out groups, and those get marked in different sorts of ways. So like age and gender are kind of consistently markers of group identity, but then there tends to be some other kind of marker in various places. In U.S. culture, race is often that other factor. In other places, religion might serve as that factor. But regardless of what that kind of third coalitional factor is, it's very often marked by the foods that people eat, or the foods that people eat are often diagnostic of that. And so we in the United States and in many other cultures are increasingly becoming xenophobic. And I think one way of sort of policing the us versus them that tends to happen is that, people who are immigrating from other cultures tend to eat differently. And so there is that kind of automatic telltale sign that they're different in some way, and that difference tends to be policed.
Mm-hmm. So this is a two-part question. So do you have specific food rules for yourself? You mentioned one, you're vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else that you feel in terms of just the idea of food rules that you live by?
Veganism is definitely sort of the guiding principle for me. And beyond that, not too much. I think I try to eat a somewhat balanced diet, but I don't tend to have other kind of rules.
And then, so you're a parent. Do you have food rules for your child? And how does that look? Because I think as parents, the idea of setting boundaries, we want our kids to be healthy and well-rounded and all. So how as a parent, what does that look like for you?
It's been hard. It's really a struggle of parenting that I hadn't fully anticipated would be such a big challenge. We've tried to allow for a lot of autonomy in what our daughter eats, but she also has an extremely strong sweet tooth, and I think would eat sugar for every meal if she could. And so we've gone back and forth on thinking about the best way to not be overly restrictive, but also to ensure that she is eating healthily.
Can you give any tips for people who are maybe in that same boat? Like, do you have any, is there anything that's worked for you or that feels comforting in terms of your sort of moral philosophies in this area? But also looking out for your child's best interest and finding, is there a sweet spot there? Oh, no pun intended, actually.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we have implemented for the last maybe 6 months or so that I think is working pretty well is that rather than saying like, no, you can't have dessert, no, you can't have dessert now, and constantly just saying no, 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 no every time, she asks or thinks about like maybe we could have just a little bit of chocolate or a lollipop or cake or something. We've started using a ticket system, so she gets 10 tickets on the first day of every month that she can then spend on some kind of dessert whenever she wants. So it feels like we've kind of given her back some of that autonomy to really choose when she's having dessert without her being able to choose to have dessert 3 times a day every day. So she did an incredible job the first couple of months of rationing and like figuring out like, okay, I need to spend like 1 ticket every 3 days or so, and I can spread this out. And she spread it out really well. The last couple of months, she's burned through the tickets immediately. And yeah, I mean, some days she's had like a lollipop for breakfast or something like that where, yeah, I think it hasn't necessarily been the best choice, but she's also, I think, learning and figuring out for herself that like it doesn't feel good for her body to start the day with something sugary.
Yeah. I think that that kind of having them, like you said, like learn themselves and make mistakes just like you would, right? If they fall on the playground, then they learn. They kind of have to do that a little bit with food. And because parents, we're the ones providing their food. They're not, they really have very little choice, right? So this is kind of where they're taking the reins. But I don't remember where I had read this years ago, but I thought it was really interesting how you brought it up too, where you kept saying it didn't feel good to keep saying no, 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 right? And like, how do we think about that? Where instead of saying no, you say yes. You say yes. You can have whatever. At this time, or yes, you can have that when we're done with this, or yes, you can, but instead of starting it off with no, yada, 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 you start it off with yes, so that they have that immediate, like, I did it. But then you're kind of like controlling the narrative a little bit of like how it gets done. So I thought that was like interesting in response to your no, no, no. But I had like another parenting question like that for you. My kids mostly buy lunch at school. And one came home and said she had like a hot dog. And I was like, okay, that's a choice, whatever. And then the next day, what did you have? I had a hot dog. Day 3, I had a hot dog. And as many of our, readers and listeners and viewers know, I am less of the no kind of parent and more of the yes kind of parent when it comes to food. But this was a really interesting dilemma because I am a proponent of variety. So even if you're eating a hot dog, it's not good or bad. But we do get the most bang for our buck when we try different things all the time, right? Because then it's like you're not putting your eggs all in one basket. And so I was thinking to myself kind of like, how do I respond to this? Do I respond to this? Do I just let her eat hot dogs until she drops and then figures it out? I don't know. But I ended up kind of saying something in the moment that I like thought that maybe wasn't the best thing that I had said or the best advice that I had given. But, I had said to her, like, why don't you try something else type of comment. And she got like upset. She got mad at me, kind of like I was commenting on her choices. And after a few minutes, I asked to sit with her again. And I, said to her, I trust you and I trust your choices and I think you make great choices. And if you have any questions about your choices, let me know. Because it was like, it felt like it was I realized how much that hurt her. It was more about the choices and more about the independence than it was.
She felt your judgment.
Yeah, like her judgment.
Yeah.
And like what you said, that's kind of all we have in a lot of ways as humans. That's how we're identified as good as bad. That's how we're identified in group or out of group, is like these kind of basic core judgments we're making. And I realized how much that was.
And it can be so hard as parents because we just want the best for our kids. And it all comes from a place of love and trying to sort of navigate these new waters. And sometimes the waters feel really deep and we're just like treading water and you're doing your best. But it can be really hard. And so like as a dietitian. Responding to Josh's like doing the tickets.
Yes.
Like what, like how did, from your dietitian perspective, like do you have a thought on that?
No, I think every family is different, and I have not heard that one before. I do feel like the tickets is aligning like reward. Like tickets in my mind feel like reward. And I love that she is almost like not seeing it like that. Like it sounds like you guys are, but maybe she's not. And but I was thinking that she would align it as a reward, but she's just kind of like, I want it when I want it. And so I think that's like really interesting because like as parents, a lot of times we have like a plan and we have like an idea in our head, and it's interesting when the kids take a hold of that idea. It's like they almost flip it on their head. And so I'm curious to hear how it's all going to pan out.
And kids are so different. Like some kids, like you give them like, money to spend on something. Some kids might like save it, right? And like just allocate it over time and really be careful. Yeah. And other kids are, and adults too, right? Have like $20 and it burns a hole in their pocket. They want to spend it. So I'm sure there is just, we're all different, right? And Emily and I are always saying this, like one, just in the area of health and nutrition, like one size doesn't fit all. What's right for one person is just not for the other. And I think we are in that culture where we want that answer and that quick fix. And, it takes asking a lot of questions and being thoughtful. And but it is kind of fun when you get a little nugget from someone else.
Yes, like what are you doing?
That does help for your parenting, right?
Yes.
That always feels really good when you get that advice that works for you, or at least for a moment works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It always switches after a month, right? Like sleep training. You're like, I got them. They're sleeping 8 hours a night, and then they're up again. No.
Yeah. So, and we've had so many discussions like that with like kids who don't want to eat a lot of food. Like they're very choosy about what they decide to put in their mouth. And Emily and I have both had challenges with that in our families. And they most of the time they end up eating a variety over time. And there's it's just a natural. Some kids just start out liking more things than others. And we have a joke in our family that my younger son, who really didn't like a lot of things when he was young, we got to the point where he was a teenager, and I was sitting at the dinner table one night, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe like we just have to accept that you don't like sweet potatoes, and because I would always encourage them just to take one bite, just like, and then like maybe the next time, sometimes it takes multiple exposures. But we kind of sat there, and I kind of laughed, and I thought, you know what? Like he is going to be a fine human being if he does not like sweet potatoes. And just because I love sweet potatoes doesn't, so sometimes I think we just, have these, like, it's like we want to accomplish things for our kids that maybe don't need to be accomplished.
Yeah. But it is really hard to not have that kind of helicoptery tendency and to, I think it's really easy to fall back into accidentally using food as a reward or something like that.
Yes.
Or like giving a reward for eating healthy food or something like that. And it's
and just the crossroads of like if nothing's really good or bad, like how we decide ultimately what kind of is good or bad. It's just it's something that we could just talk about forever because there's
I also feel like, too, for the first 4 years of life or whatever, your kids are with you. They're only eating mostly around you, and it's all about kind of like your little family. And then they get thrown into the world, and they're eating lunch at school and figuring things out. And so they're hearing
have to let them.
So many messages. The other night, my son was eating, and typically what I have to do, because, again, he's chooses some things, not others. I'm separating foods. I'll make, one dinner for all of us, but I keep it separate, and then I'll mix it together kind of for everybody else. And he said, "What are we having?" And I said, "This, but I'm gonna keep the chicken and noodles separate." And he was like, "Well, I'd actually like want to have it all together, like you guys are having it." I was like, "Okay." So I kept it separate, some separate just in case.
Backup plate.
I like mix it together, and I put it, and it was mushrooms and peppers with the chicken and noodles. And the rest of us really liked it. We're eating it, and he said he just dug right in. He took his fork and he stabbed the mushroom and just ate it fully whole. And I could see his face, and I thought he was gonna gag, but he swallowed it. And then he took the whole pepper, put it right in, chewed it, and swallowed it. And I was like, "Well, how'd you like it?" And he was like, "Not my favorite," but then moved on. And I just wanted to know all of this. I was like, "Why did you choose to do it? Why did you choose to do it in that
very
order?"
adventurous.
Why did you take the whole bite? Why did you smell it first? Like, I wanted to kind of know the whole thing, but I held back, and we kind of just kept moving on through dinner.
He normally does that, and he didn't, and it's sort of like, how did we
like why?
reach this crossroads?
Like, did you see someone eating that at school? Did someone say something? Like, he's in activities. Did a coach say you may want to throw in a veggie or two?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, where it all came from. But I was like, all right, bite my tongue on this one, Emily.
So funny. So, who is the cook in your family?
We don't do it. We have been bad at like really cooking.
Josh,
like bad. Yeah. I think we have done a lot of fairly quick meals recently. I think we've gotten out of the habit of really like cooking big meals. But when we cook, which is at least a couple 2-3 times a week, we try to do more elaborate meals, and then we typically trade off, my wife and I. But I think we're both kind of equally.
It's hard. Like, life gets busy, and it can be hard to find that time. And I often refer to assembled meals. That's sort of the meals that don't require a lot of active cooking, but that you can put them together and they still taste great, and everybody feels satisfied. And there is a place for that for sure.
Oh, I bet Anne has a meal that she is making this week that's going to make us all drool.
One that is on my list for this week, and you would actually perhaps be a fan. I call them Spanish style chickpeas, and it's a vegan dish that is basically like chickpeas in just a red, kind of a little saucy red sauce. And I can eat them just plain with maybe a piece of bread on the side and a little side salad. Sometimes I just do sliced oranges. It kind of goes back to, I studied years ago in Madrid, and it was something that I remember as a like a tapas there, and I kind of made it a version into like we have it for dinner.
That sounds great.
So the oranges kind of, it's like my little Spanish influence, and it's also very easy, just slicing an orange, and everybody kind of likes it. It's just a nice alternative to a salad. But I will typically, for my family, add rice just to make it a little heartier, because I have a lot of big appetites in my family. So I need to sort of bulk it up a little bit more. And it's nice, the sauce, you get the rice and it kind of soaks it up. So Spanish-style chickpeas, Josh.
Yeah, we will have to add that.
And it's quick. It's an easy meal. Emily,
it's my number one.
Yeah.
My number one recipe from Fountain Avenue Kitchen. And kids, like my friends' kids, love it. Like, it's just one of those.
That was a fun realization because I often think of beans as and maybe it was just my childhood. I wasn't like, oh, yum, beans. And that recipe has been really widely received by kids.
Yeah.
Which was a surprise for me, which I loved.
I think it's when you talk about like the sauciness, it's a tomato sauciness. And I wonder if it's like the familiarity of kind of like an Italian dish like pasta with sauce or something, and it just has a little bit more chew to it, but it has that like a good flavor.
And are the little like circles of chickpeas more appealing than like like a cannellini or a black bean, the shape? Like, because I feel like as a kid too, shapes and the way things look can matter. So perhaps. But yes, so that's on my. That's on my.
That sounds great.
Yeah. What are you making this week, Emily?
I am making something that is not vegan, Josh, but it is simple salmon and foil, which is one of my go-tos. My kids really like salmon. They like salmon teriyaki, but they also love it in this preparation, which is so easy. One of my favorites from Fountain Avenue Kitchen. Just put the salmon on the foil, basically top it with a kind of butter, garlicky, herb, lemony sauce, and bake it. And I kind of just put it in the center of the table. Let's have at it, family style. So, and then I can have the leftovers for lunch the next day, like a little salad bowl.
I love leftovers for lunch. The Spanish chickpeas, you could pack them up, take them to work with you.
Wait, hold on. This is the best dish for Josh. You know why?
Why?
Because yes, you can have them for dinner, but Anne and I have also had them for breakfast.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is like your dinner/breakfast combo meal that like you have in your dreams.
Yeah,
because you can't decide. So here you go.
Yep.
It's true.
Yep.
And yeah, I love chickpeas, and yeah, it also gets the sweet and the salty together.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. And I grew up very much a cereal, kind of more of a sweet kind of carb type breakfast. And I remember hearing about like people in Japan would eat fish for breakfast. And when we went, just going back to what people from other cultures have in their lunchbox. And I just thought, because it wasn't what we did, I just thought that was so funny. And I couldn't imagine eating fish. And I grew up on, but Emily and I, we talk about this, we've both evolved to really enjoying a savory breakfast and eating leftovers for breakfast. And sometimes we say people who looked at what we would eat for breakfast were probably like, why are you eating that
I'm
for
only
breakfast?
telling you this. And I'm like, fine, I'm only telling you this. But there was definitely kale salad on my breakfast.
And it was delicious. So we don't judge. And that whole question of like, what's your favorite meal? There's a lot of fluidity there, right? You know, you could have anything at any meal and that is okay. And so it was delightful having you here. I feel like we like to ask questions and you really gave us a lot to think about. So
yes,
we appreciate.
You're such a good sport. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.